So what's up guys, my name's Ash and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video guys, I've got some custom tactics and player instructions for definitely the best formation in FIFA 23, this being the 4-3-2-1. But just before we get started guys, as always, I'd very much appreciate it if you could drop this a thumbs up. Okay guys, so starting off
team
with
of the
custom
season, so if you
tactics
guys
for the
need any
defensive
coins,
style,
make sure you
as
check out
always, I like to have this
MMOXP.com. Their link is
on
down in the
balance.
description.
The reason we have this on balance is because it gives us the greatest control over our defense, where when you need to press, you're able to press, and when you want to drop back and be a little bit more passive, you're also able to do so. Having this on balanced is very important as it definitely gives you the most consistent defense possible. Moving on to the width guys, I like to have this on 40. This is so we can primarily defend in a nice, narrow and compact shape. This means we're going to stop our opponents being able to attack right through the middle and being able to run right through us. It's important not to lower the width too much though, as it's important to maintain a bit of natural width to cover the wider areas in case an opponent tries an attack down the wing. So the way this is set up is we're quite a narrow defense, but we're not too narrow. Now moving on to the depth guys, I like to have this on 65. This is so we can win the ball nice and high up the pitch, but the reason I don't have it any higher is because if you have your depth too high, then one through ball will absolutely destroy you. So having it on 65 allows us to win the ball higher up the pitch with like a nice and high defensive line, but the defensive line isn't too high at the same time, if that makes sense. Moving on to build-up play guys, I have this on balance. This is because it's the most varied and controlled form of build-up. Basically you can pick and choose when you want to play slower and when you want to play a little bit faster. The other settings are very one-dimensional because it restricts you to a certain play style at all times. For example, if you use slow build-up, you're always going to have to build up slowly. You can't randomly decide that you want to play a bit quicker. The same with fast build-up, you can't just randomly play a little bit slower, but with balance you can pick and choose when you want to play slower and when you want to play a little bit faster. Moving on to chance creation guys, I suggest using direct passing. This is because it's by far the most meta option in the game. Basically your attacking players will bunch up against the defenders, so you can do the really overpowered 1v1 isolation plays. Players also make those extra movements in the box so you can get off that extra pass to guarantee the goals. Direct passing is super important in my opinion. Moving on to the attacking width guys, I like to have this on 45. The reason for this is I don't like having my width too high, otherwise this feels like a 4-3-3 and we don't really want that. It is a narrow formation, so we don't want to make it something it's not, but on the flip side we don't want to make it too narrow with the low width because it feels like your players are way too close together. So something in between is really nice, which is why I like it on 45. Moving on to players in box guys, I have this on 4. This is so we can get some players into the penalty area, but we don't overcommit the entire team to the point where we're always getting counter attacked. And as for corners and free kicks, I have these both on 1 because there is a set piece routine that I use which requires these to be on 1. There is a link to that in the top right hand corner of the screen. Now moving on to the players you want to use guys, in the striker position I suggest going for a nice well-rounded striker. This is because you have to compensate for the fact that this is a one striker formation, and where you could get the balance between 2 players in a 2 striker formation, you have to get that all in 1 player in this formation. So I would suggest going for somebody that can shoot on either foot, so like a 5-star weak foot would be ideal, somebody that has a good dribbling ability, somebody that is obviously quick and has enough physicality, and somebody that can pass as well so that they can help link up the play. I think it's super important to have a nice well-rounded striker as it gets the whole team going in my opinion. Moving on to the right forward and the left forward, I suggest you guys use like winger style players. These are obviously players that are very quick, maybe have the decent skill moves and the dribbling to beat a man. It's super important because these players are like the main outlets in the team. Even though it is a narrow formation, these will be like the ones that, you know, make all the runs and stuff like that. So it's important to use players that are competent enough to do that. You don't have to worry about defensive stats, but just make sure that these players can also finish off a chance, as they will often get into those areas where they need to shoot. Moving on to the right centre mid guys, I like to go for a more box-to-box midfielder. This is somebody that is going to attack and defend, so I would suggest somebody with a high work rate if you can get it, as you get the maximum contributions in both attack and defence, but just ensure that this player has a nice well-rounded card. Moving on to the middle centre mid, I like to go for a more defensive minded player. This is somebody that's going to stay back, break up the play and ensure we're as good defensively as possible possibly as we possibly can be, sorry. So I would suggest somebody with a medium high work rate, as they give you the best contribution in defense and they're not too bothered about going forward. Moving on to the left centre mid, I suggest you guys use an actual attacker here. This is because this player is not actually going to have to play as a centre mid when we don't have the ball, so it really isn't important that this player has good defensive stats. You really don't have to worry about that. So you can use an actual attacker here, somebody like an Mbappe, Neymar, Alawara and Jairzinho, basically anyone you want in this position right here. Moving on to the fullbacks, I like to go for a balance between the two. So I have Roberto Carlos, who's my more attacking minded fullback. This is somebody that's actually going to join the attack and contribute for us. And then in the right back position, I've got a more defensive minded player in Cafu that is just going to stay back and bring balance to the back four. As for the centre backs and the goalkeeper, these just need to be the full meta players. There's really not too much to say about them. You guys know the types of players that we should be using here at this point. Finally, moving on to the player instructions, guys. On the striker, I like to have him on stay central and mixed attack. We have him on stay central because we don't want this player drifting off into the wider areas. He is our striker, so it is important that he maintains that central position so he's always in the correct position. If we have him drifting out wide, he's not really going to be able to do his job. We also have him on mixed attack as opposed to getting behind, as I feel like it makes the players much better in the build-up. If you put this player on getting behind, they always make the same one-dimensional and predictable runs, and against a top opponent that is very easy to prevent. I suggest having it on mixed attack because the players just make more dynamic movements, get more involved in the build-up, and I just find it a bit easier to attack as a whole. Moving on to the left forward, guys, sorry, I like to have him on stay central and getting behind. The reason we have him on stay central is because although he's like one of the wider players in this formation, you don't want him drifting out wide and becoming like an actual winger, because that makes this formation play out like a 4-3-3, and we don't want that. So we want him to stay central so he gets into those pockets of space that are very difficult for your opponent to mark, and it maintains the narrow structure of the formation. We do actually have this player on getting behind though, so they're always looking to trouble the defenders with their pace. And for example, if the striker drops back a little bit deeper with mixed attack, for example, they could play a through ball to this player who's running in behind. I hope you guys can see how this would work. Moving on to the right forward, guys, we actually just have him on comeback on defense, and this is because it makes the formation defend in a 4-4-2. The reason we do this is because the 4-4-2 is a much more superior defensive formation than the 4-3-2-1. So by making this right forward comeback to defend, he will defend as a right mid in the 4-4-2, which makes us both very good in attack and defense. Moving on to the right centre mid, guys, where we use an actual box-to-box midfielder. We have him on the default settings and cover centre. We have him on default settings because he is a box-to-box player, so we don't want to restrict him all that much. The only important thing is that we have him on cover centre, so he does defend as one of the centre mids in the 4-4-2 shape. Moving on to the middle centre mid, the more defensive minded player, we have him on stay back, stay on the edge of the box across and cover centre. We have him on stay back so he doesn't go flying forward. We have him on stay on the edge of the box for cross, so if he does end up going forward, he won't commit all the way into the penalty area. And most importantly, we have him on cover centre so he does defend as one of the centre mids in the 4-4-2. In the left centre mid spot where I said you guys can use an actual attacker, we have him on get forward, get into the box for cross, and most importantly, cover wing. We have him on get forward because he is obviously an attacker, so we do want him to be joining the attack with the rest of the team. We have him on get into the box across, so he's not hesitant to get into the penalty area and contribute there. And most importantly, cover wing means he's going to defend as a left mid in the 4-4-2 shape when we don't have the ball. This is why I said it's not super important that this player has good defensive stats, as they don't actually have to play as a centre mid when we don't have the ball, so we can get away with using an actual attacker here. Moving on to the left back, guys, my more attacking minded fullback, we have him on balanced attack and overlap. We have him on balanced attack so he's not scared to join the attack, and we have him on the overlap run type so he does make the overlapping runs to add extra width to the attack. This is so we have both players in the narrow areas and the wide areas, which makes it very difficult to defend against. If we have this player on balanced overlap, like I said, we get a wider option and the opponent can't mark both the narrow areas and the wider areas at the same time. Now in the right back position, my more defensive defensive fullback, I have him on stay back and overlap. This is so we always have at least 3 defenders back at a time, but we have him on the overlap run type, so when I do send him on a run forward, he will make the overlapping runs to add extra width. As for the centre backs and the keeper, these are on the default settings and I do not touch them. But yeah guys, they're my custom tactics and player instructions for the 4-3-2-1. If you have enjoyed or found it useful, please be sure to drop this a like, sub to the channel if you are new so you never miss out on any videos like this one, and don't forget to turn on notifications. And with all that aside guys, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.